What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Universal Mastery. Welcome back to my public YouTube channel. And today we have something that is extremely unique that we are going to be talking about. We're talking about the significant cycle, the toxic cycle between the narcissist and the codependent, and how they play so nicely together, and why that cycle is so unhealthy, but at the same time so important to understand. In this video, we're going to really be going into very much depth with what creates the narcissist, what creates the codependency, what creates the relationship between these two, how these two actually thrive off of each other, and how there are many similarities between a codependent and a narcissist. We're going to really be doing a deep dive on this. I'm going to be sharing this from my own personal experience, having been in these roles myself, having been raised in a family dynamic where there absolutely was a narcissist and a codependent. All right. So if this is something that you want to learn a lot more about, then I highly recommend that you stay tuned for the rest of this video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're talking about the narcissist as well as the codependent. This is a relationship that is much more common than what people actually like to recognize. Hold on, I might sneeze, hold on. There we go. Okay, just had to get a little release going on there. Okay, so this relationship dynamic is much more common than what a lot of us actually like to recognize. Now, the first thing that we want to look at is when it comes to real deal, full-blown narcissism, there is a spectrum to that. And the same thing when it comes to being a codependent, there is a spectrum to that, which means we can almost look at it like there is a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high. 1 being low, 10 being high. So you can fall anywhere on this spectrum of either narcissism or codependency. And it doesn't necessarily mean you are a diagnosed narcissist or that you are a full-blown codependent. You might just have certain types of tendencies in there from things that you've picked up over your life experience. So the point of me saying that is to create a context so that a lot of you can actually realize, like, a lot of you are probably in these types of relationship dynamics if you're in relationships, as well as just behavior patterns in general with yourself and with the world around you. And I will be explaining exactly what it is that I mean throughout this video. And there's probably going to be certain aspects of what it is that I'm talking about that you're going to resonate with. And I just want you to know that this is not a bad thing. This is not something that you should blame yourself for, judge, or shame yourself for. It simply is a result of trauma, and it is quite common in our today's time. And obviously the first place that we want to start with it is we want to start with consciousness. We want to start with becoming aware of our behavior patterns, or becoming aware of ourselves and why we are acting the way that we might be. Okay? So when it comes to the relationship between a narcissist and a codependent, there is a lot of similarities between a narcissist and a codependent. There is actually, I would say, a lot more similarities than there is differences. And when we look at the concept of energetic resonance, which is the energetic field that we're always emanating based on our nervous system and what is stored within our bodies at that nervous system level, this is what energetic resonance is going to be. So why is it that a codependent is always in resonance with a narcissist and a narcissist is always in resonance with a codependent? That's something that we want to look at. That's because there are some similarities in the resonance between these two. So narcissism is just a different way of operating than how a codependent operates. They are similar in nature. They actually have similar underlying things that are going on under the surface, but their ways of operating are different. Okay? For those of you that don't really know, narcissism has to create a false self that basically worships self or sees self as the absolutely most important thing in the world, on the planet, in order to survive. That's how it's operating. So it's like a survival state of venerating a false self as the most important thing in the world because that's how it has to survive. Whereas codependency creates a false self that actually leaves the self. And you could say both narcissist and codependent, they leave themselves, but the codependent creates a false self that gets a lot of its sense of energy or its sense of control by sort of feeding other people and enabling other people to, operate in ways that oftentimes are not that healthy. So codependents can oftentimes fall into people-pleasing types of identities, and they can be enablers for things like unhealthy behaviors or unhealthy substance addictions and things in that nature. So codependents, once again, they get their sense of control from the false self by providing a certain energy for people that lets these people feel good and makes these people feel accepted or feels like they're not going to be abandoned, but it's doing it in a inauthentic way. It's not completely true to what the codependent is actually feeling under the surface. And they're doing it from the lens of trying to be accepted or trying to be loved. Whereas the narcissist is consuming that energy and is in much more of a survivalistic state of the false self. And they have to always see themselves as the most important and the most valuable, unique thing on the planet, more so than everyone else. And that's how they, keep themselves safe and give themselves that false security of loving themselves. Okay, which is not an authentic love, because both narcissist and codependent are not connected to their true self. They are both wearing masks the masks are rooted in similar traumas, which is what we're going to go into in this video. They're both wearing masks, and their masks operate in different ways, kind of like perfect contrast to one another. But under the surface, at that trauma level, there's a lot of similarities. That's why they always find each other. That's why they're always in some form of energetic resonance. Okay, so we're going to start with looking a little bit at the narcissist here. So the narcissist is going to be created from severe emotional abuse and severe emotional neglect and different forms of complex trauma. So that complex trauma is going to be emotional, neglect and abuse, as well as all other types like physical, sexual, all those types. And then when we look over at the codependent, they are also going to be created through complex trauma as well. So complex trauma is basically, a very traumatic childhood where there's traumas coming from the left, trauma coming from the right, neglect coming from the left, neglect coming from the right, all different types of abuse that are kind of always bombarding the nervous system. And that's what makes it complex. So over time, because there's so much danger and there's so much unsafety, it's very easy to separate from the core and then have to create an identity to be able to survive in these complex, traumatizing environments. So once again, the narcissist is experiencing that in life. They're going through extreme neglect and extreme abuse. And oftentimes what creates a narcissist is another narcissist. Okay, so another narcissist in the family, whether it's your dad or your mom, your brother, your sister, the narcissists oftentimes can create other narcissists, and they can also create codependence. So if there wasn't a narcissist in the home, then once again, severe emotional neglect, severe emotional abuse, or other types as well, that can create a narcissist where they have to shell themselves off. They have to create, let me put it this way, they have to create a false self, and they have to like completely shell off the true self. And then they have to, with their false self, they have to completely basically be living in a way that is a show. Every day is a show. Every day is an act. And they're observing from the false self everything around them. And they're making sure that they always are looking good, or they are making sure they always are in some form of control or look like they are in control. So they're never grounded in the authentic self and able to be coming from that space and perception. They're operating from the false self with the authentic self completely shelled off. And then they live in the fantasy realm of being in a play. Everything is an act. Everything is about what is going to make me look better. What is going to give me more control in my life? And that's how they're trying to survive, because when they were in childhood, they didn't have any control. They didn't have any sense of safety, being their true self, being authentic, and they were not able to get any of their needs met. So they had to become this grandiose version of themselves just to feel like they have some sense of reason for being alive. And it's a really sad thing. It is sad. And that's why we never want to jump to just shaming or hurting narcissists, because they've been through some really tough stuff in their life. Okay. The codependent, on the other hand, is going to be raised with complex trauma as well. And the codependent identity mask is absolutely going to be rooted with a narcissist in the home. Almost 100% of the times, there is going to be another narcissist living in the family dynamic. That is what creates a codependent personality disorder. So what this means is that the person who is, the child, let's say the younger person in the family, anywhere from the age of like 1 to 10, they're experiencing a family dynamic where, let's say, dad is a narcissist, mom is a codependent. Well, everything in that family dynamic is going to revolve around the narcissist. So very quickly, the child learns that, oh, if dad is not happy with me, if dad is not satisfied, then that means I'm not being loved. That means my needs aren't being met. That means I could die. So I'm going to learn how to pick up off of what mom is doing, because mom is playing that codependent role with dad, which means she's going to be supporting and enabling dad's narcissistic behavior patterns, which is then demonstrating to me, the child, that this is how I need to survive in life. I need to please the narcissist. I need to keep them satisfied. I need to keep them happy. I need to make sure they are okay so that I can be okay, because that's the only way I can get my needs met, and that's the only way I'm not going to die. This is literally what creates a codependent personality mask that someone wears. And, they find ways to, leave their authentic self, to wear a mask, to then please, to then enable that narcissistic personality. And, as they're doing that, the better they are at doing that, the better they're going to be able to navigate that narcissistic relationship or that narcissistic family dynamic. And that's going to in some ways, it's going to wire their system, their nervous system, to think this is how I survive in life. I have to always wear this mask, and I have to always find ways to enable. I have to find ways to kind of please in that way. I have to find ways to give myself so that other people can feel better about themselves, specifically the narcissistic personalities. And that's what's going to allow them to love me. So this is not coming from a selfless place for the codependent. They're doing it because they're actually trying to get their needs met. And this is how they feel like they're not going to be hurt, or it's how they feel like they're not going to be abandoned if they're always enabling, always giving themselves, always, saving the other person, so to speak. And that is, there's a selfish root to that, because they're not being completely authentic, and they're not just, actually coming from a place of real, true love that is willing to let certain things go. So they're kind of attaching and operating from that false self. So both from what I just explained now, you should have a deeper understanding that the narcissist and the codependent, although they operate in very different ways, they come from similar backgrounds with family dynamics and complex trauma. That's the root of it. They both go through significant amounts of complex trauma. All right. So similar backgrounds, similar stuff going on underneath the surface, different ways of operating. All right. So the next thing that we want to look at here is we want to look at the reality that the narcissist and the codependent, the two primary emotions that are actually going on underneath the surface, that they are both completely terrified to feel through and to embrace and to integrate and heal. The two primary emotions that are driving these personality disorders is shame. Okay, it's shame. They both feel shame towards their authentic self. They both feel like their true self is not okay. They feel like their true self is not good enough. They feel like their true self is inherently bad. They feel like their true self is going to cause their life to crumble. They feel like their true self is dangerous. They feel like their true self is not worthy whatsoever of any form of love or acceptance or anything in that nature. So they carry this deep sense of shame all the time towards the true self, the authentic self, which is what supports their false self identity. So they exist in the false self, operating in the ways that they operate, because they're constantly playing a streamline of shame towards their authentic self, which reminds them and reaffirms to them, this is why I am not being myself. This is why I'm not being authentic. This is why I'm being a codependent. This is why I'm a narcissist. Because if I'm not this way, I will never get love. I will never be accepted. I'm not good enough. I'm a bad little boy. I'm a bad little girl. I am, I'm terrible, right? So that's important to know. Like, when it comes to these dynamics, shame is underneath of all of it. Now, this is the thing. So someone that's operating from a codependent personality, they are always going to resonate, energetically speaking, with a narcissist. Remember what I've said in other videos. If you've watched my other videos that are kind of covering the trauma components of things and the self-development components of things, you will have picked up on the education that when we have certain repressed emotions in our nervous system, this is what's affecting our energetic field. It's our energetic resonance. So if I'm carrying a deep shame, like a really, really severe deep shame in my nervous system, I'm going to then be in resonance with other people that are carrying that degree of deep shame in their nervous system as well. So when it comes to the codependent and the narcissist, they're carrying that same amount of deep shame towards their true self. That's what puts them in so much resonance with each other. Okay, so the codependent is always going to attract a narcissist. The narcissist is always going to find a codependent. And that's usually how it happens too. Usually the codependent kind of attracts the narcissist and the narcissist finds the codependent. That's usually how it's going to happen, because the narcissist is operating from, I've got to control, I've got to, go after the things that make me feel better about myself, that make me feel in more of a position of power. So I'm going to go conquer and I'm going to go get that. Whereas the codependent is just doing everything they can to enable the world around them, people pleasing other people to try to, get people to like them and, love them. And they're just kind of broadcasting an energy of, where's my narcissist? Where's my narcissist? I need a narcissist. And then the narcissist eventually finds them. All right. Here's the other thing about a codependent and a narcissist. They are both, like, when it comes to a narcissist and codependent, they are both narcissists under the surface. So a codependent is not this like what some people think, that codependency is just like, oh, you're an all-giving person. You just give too much, and that's why you were taken advantage of. No, codependency, being a codependent, I should say, is there's narcissistic roots that are driving it. So remember, the codependent is operating from a space of they're giving, they're enabling, they're people-pleasing because they want control. Because they're afraid that if they don't do that, they're not going to be loved. So they need to do those things in an unhealthy way to get their sense of control, their sense of power almost. So that's another thing that puts these two in resonance. They're both narcissists underneath the surface. There are narcissistic qualities and tendencies, I should say. And that's also why they work so well together, because they understand each other in relationships. And when I say work so well, I don't mean like it's not that they are successful in their relationships, because they're not, but they work well in the sense that they attract each other so effortlessly. And so they fit like a puzzle piece for a period of time until it completely shatters. All right. Okay. So the narcissist is always looking for a supply. They call it the narcissistic supply, which means the narcissist always needs some form of gratification, some form of validation for their false self, some form of something to be able to control and to dominate in order to, once again, feed the false self. So they need a supply. They need their narcissistic supply. Well, the codependent, on the other hand, says, I am your supply. I am the person that's going to enable you. I'm going to feed your false self. I'm going to please you in all those ways and keep you happy and build that image that you're trying to create for yourself. Just don't leave me. Just don't abandon me, because I don't want to feel the shame of who I actually am. And then the narcissist says, okay, well, you go ahead, you enable me, you feed my false self, you make me feel powerful, and I will not abandon you. And we'll keep this contract in place. And as long as everything is happening the way that we're agreeing on, we're going to be in a relationship. But the second you stop feeding my false self, that's when things are going to start shifting. This is literally the subconscious commitment that both a codependent and a narcissist will make with each other, whether they're aware of this or not, as they are entering into a relationship with one another. There are some circumstances where these relationships can actually last a very long period of time, but it's always going to end up getting to the point where the person who is the codependent is going to run out of energy. Okay, so the narcissist is like a black hole consuming all of that supply, all of that gratification, validation, enabling, all that energy from the codependent. Now, the codependent has built an entire self, false self, off of doing those things, so they can do that for quite a while, but eventually they're going to lose their energy. They're going to be drained and they're not going to have much to give anymore. This is when we see the relationship between the two start to take a turn, because when the narcissist is no longer getting that supply anymore, the narcissist, their first response is, okay, well, you're not meeting your end of the bargain, so I'm going to have to go find someone else or something else to become my new supply, which means I have to do this for me. And because my reality revolves around me, and because you've been feeding my sense of self, my false sense of self in that way, this whole relationship, you should already know that that's the most important thing on the planet. So sorry, I'm going to have to leave you and I'm going to go find that. And this is how a lot of these relationships end, where the narcissist ends up completely abandoning and discarding, they call it the narcissistic discard of the codependent, and then they go and they actually look for another codependent personality to become the new supply. Okay? And then they start they literally go through that same cycle again and again and again. Sometimes these cycles can last years. I mean, how many people have been in marriages together where one's the narcissist, the other's the codependent, and they last in the marriage for about like 5 years, 10 years, maybe even. And then that supply completely runs out, and then the narcissist discards the marriage. They discard the person, and then they get into another relationship. And then the same thing happens again. 5 years in the marriage, ends the marriage, goes into another one. And it just becomes this repetitive cycle that just is ongoing. And the narcissist is never really understanding, or is even very much so concerned about understanding why is this cycle taking place. They're only thinking about their image. They're only thinking about, how can I get my next supply? How can I be in control? How can I keep myself protected by doing these things? And then the codependent is like, you know, oftentimes the codependent is like really hurt because they were just abandoned and they were drained of all their energy. Usually there's more room for the codependent to be able to start a process of healing, because once you're drained like that and then you are discarded and left feeling abandoned, there's a lot more room to then have to feel some of those deeper rooted emotions that are under the surface, like the shame, the guilt, the sadness, the grief, all of those feelings. So there's oftentimes more room for that codependent personality to actually heal and then release that mask and then start a process of connecting to the authentic self. But it does not always work that way. Sometimes the codependent just, you know, holds a grudge and holds a resentment and says, no, that person is just whatever. That person, it's their fault. They're the way that they did me so dirty. I can't believe they did that. Now I'm going to go do the same thing again. I'm going to be in the same energy. I'm going to wear the same mask. And now I'm going to attract someone that will actually love me. And I'm going to give them even more. And I'm going to enable them even more. I'm going to please them even more. And then they end up attracting another narcissist in their life, and the cycle just repeats itself. It literally is like a freaking TV show. Like when you watch a TV show and you get through the whole show, and then the first time you watch it, you're like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. Like, I can't believe that happened. Wow, what a good show. And then you play it back and you watch it again. You're like, oh, okay, interesting. Like, I didn't notice that part. And then you play it back and you watch it again, and then you're like, okay, yeah, I remember that. And you play it back and you watch it again, then you're like, okay, this is kind of repetitive now. Then you play it back, watch it again, and then you get to the point where you're like, I've seen this so many times, it doesn't surprise me. I've seen it so many times that I don't even want to watch the show anymore. Like, I'm done with this, right? That's the reality when it comes to being a codependent, and oftentimes even being a narcissist. But I would say it's a lot less likely that a narcissist is going to take that pause and then say, I don't want to keep doing this, because they're they're taking energy the whole way through. And it doesn't mean that they don't get hurt when they go through separations. They're not necessarily completely cold, but they are much more willing to shove that down and attach to the fantasy that they've created for themselves. Whereas the codependent is going to feel probably a lot more of those feelings and those emotions. And, you know, it's probably going to be a lot more painful for the person who's in the codependent side of things, because they're just getting all their energy drained, trying to be in control, and then they get that ripped away, and then they're left abandoned and having to feel the shame. So they'll end up playing that cycle out as many times as they need to until they realize, all right, I'm done with this. And that sometimes may take a couple different relationships to get to that realization. So that is what is so important to know about the codependent mask and the narcissist mask. Both codependent and narcissist, they're in a codependent relationship as a whole. So what that means is that the codependent depends on the narcissist for their sense of false self-identity. The narcissist depends on the codependent for their sense of self, for the false self-identity. So that's what a codependent relationship means. It doesn't mean we have our own individuality. It doesn't mean we have our own connection to our core and our authentic self, and then we meet each other from that organic whole self space. So it's not I, Jeremiah, meet you as who you are from your core. I don't depend on you for my self-worth or my sense of self core connection. And reverse. The codependent relationship, they depend on each other for their sense of self. And if that breaks, then they don't know who they are. So they kind of scramble back to, where's the person? Where's my next person? And that is going to be a common thing that you will actually see for people that are being stubborn with their narcissism or their codependency, is they will always need a relationship. So they're going to be in one relationship, it's going to end terribly, and then they're going to need to get into another one, and it's going to end terribly, and then they're going to need to get into another one. They're always going to need, for the most part, someone around, because once again, they're getting their self-worth or their sense of self from other people. And it doesn't always have to mean it's coming through like an intimate relationship. This could be relationships with friends. This could be relationships with people online, even like with the age of social media and how people have Instagram and YouTube and all of those things. It can operate in that way too, which is worth noting, because just because someone's in an intimate relationship all the time, that can be an indication that there's some form of narcissism or some form of codependency that is under the surface. But if they're not in an intimate relationship, that doesn't necessarily write them off as if they're not a codependent or not a narcissist either, because they might be getting that energetic sense of self from other areas, like, once again, like Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or TikTok, or whatever else they might be using to feel that false self-identity. Okay, so give me 1 second. I just want to sit to see if there's anything else that I want to talk about with this subject right now. Okay. I think for the most part, this is what I wanted to share about the codependent and the narcissist. It's very likely that you as the viewer have probably at some point fallen into one of these different patterns yourself. remember, there are spectrums to all of this. Just because you're behaving in a codependent way does not mean you're like a level 10 codependent. Just because you have narcissistic tendencies or you notice narcissistic tendencies in someone that you've dated does not mean they're a 10 full-blown diagnosed narcissist. There's a spectrum to it, 1 to 10. So I'm sure most of you have fallen somewhere on this spectrum. I for sure have myself. To be quite honest with you, I fell into it recently. I fell into a codependent energy recently that kind of just slipped into it felt like it kind of just slipped into my nervous system as I was going through, deep processing of trauma and things like that. And it really showed me how much, abuse and, how much abuse that I had went through in the past in relationship to this cycle of narcissism and codependency. And I believe that's the reason why that energy kind of slipped into my system. And then I started unconsciously operating from a space of my false self for a period of time. It didn't last long, but it was long enough for me to end up getting into a relationship with someone that had a lot more narcissistic tendencies. And that relationship played out basically in a similar way that I was, discussing in today's video. It's you give the supply, they take it all in, and then it gets to a point where there's no more supply, and then the relationship ends up dwindling, and then you get discarded by the narcissist at some point. And it was different. I definitely had boundaries and things like that. I would say on the scale of the codependent narcissistic spectrum, I was definitely on the lower end. I would say that for the most part, and it didn't play out long, but it played out long enough to teach me a lesson and to show me more about what my true self is, what my authentic self is. And then it gave me something to reflect on in regards to how I was raised, because I was raised with severe narcissistic father and a severe codependent mother. And I had all that stuff in my nervous system and even a lot of shame myself that I had to come to terms with and I had to work through. So I share that just so that I can create an open space or some form of vulnerability for you as a listener to realize that it's very common that people will fall into these types of relationship dynamics at some level of that spectrum. So don't beat yourself up, don't judge yourself, and don't shame yourself for it. Use this video as an opportunity to self-reflect and realize, when have I done that? Why did I do that? Was I being completely real with myself? Was I wearing a mask in the ways that, Jeremiah was describing? Is there shame in my system for my authentic self? Am I able to be aware enough to realize if that shame is there? Right? These are all questions that you should ask yourself, because I think the most important thing to know is that if you're not connecting with your true self in any of this, you're operating from that false self of codependent or the narcissist, you're always going to attract those types of relationships. Narcissist is always going to attract a codependent. Codependent's always going to attract a narcissist. You will literally be replaying that cycle over and over and over and over, and it's going to end in a similar way every single time. And truth be told, it's painful for both the narcissist and the codependent. The authentic self, the inner child, goes through huge amounts of trauma by being in those relationships. It's painful. But depending on who's wearing their mask and how strong they're wearing their mask, that pain can easily get suppressed and it can get pushed down. So obviously, if you found yourself in one of those relationship dynamics, hopefully that pain of the breakup or that pain of being in what you were in can be used to break you open so that you can say, I am never wearing that mask again. I never want to go through that again. I now want to start building a relationship with myself. I want to start healing my inner child and showing my inner child that it's okay to be authentic. It's okay to be real with who I am. It's okay to feel everything that I'm truly feeling. Not just always being happy, being charismatic, trying to please people, not always having to be the center of attention or always getting validation and scanning the environment to see how I'm looking. I can be me. I can always just be who I am and know that that is enough, right? Healing that inner child and giving yourself that time to love yourself and reestablish the relationship with your core. Hopefully those types of relationships would get you to that point where you can say, that's the journey I'm now going to start walking on. All right. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button, drop down into the comment section and open up. If you found yourself in one of these types of relationships, whether you were the narcissist or you were the codependent, open up. Be vulnerable. Let me know what that was like for you. Let me know what happened in that relationship, just with some like little examples. And then let me know also how the relationship ended. Share your perspective in the comment sections, because there's a lot of people that really do read through the comments and they use it as a form of learning. So you sharing your experience can help other people learn. And I think that's an important thing. Hit the notification bell and get notified whenever I post, okay? Definitely take advantage of it. I'm posting every single day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. By subscribing, you're going to further energetically connect to everything I'm teaching. So if you want to further connect, I'd encourage you to subscribe. Now also, feel free to copy and paste this link and send it to someone that you feel like would gain value from it. Okay, I encourage you to do that as well, because you might know someone that's kind of in this space right now or in this energy right now, and they may need to hear this to better understand what they're doing or what they're in. Now I'm going to take your awareness to the most important link within my description. This is my Patreon. I have tons of exclusive content on the Patreon, organized in all of these different collection sections. I have a whole collection section on healing the inner child, working through trauma, doing the shadow work, and ultimately regulating your nervous system. That's going to be some very valuable stuff to understand and to know, so that you can really start building this relationship with yourself again. I have that and a ton of other content on the Patreon. Tier 3 and 4 gives you access to a ritual service that I offer for my collective, which is very unique. It's a ritual where I do an energetic transfer from me to you, to support you as the participant to work with those deeper layers of your own unconscious and working through those repressed energies that are in the nervous system, so that you can heal them and release them. Overall, what this does is it allows you to merge with your shadow, so that your shadow can start working with you in your everyday life and no longer having to resist you because you're suppressing it. And so that you don't have to keep replaying all these trauma cycles over and over again. So this is what I offer for the Patreon. So if you're interested in it, definitely look into it. It's the first link below. Second link is where you can book a one-on-one call with me, or you can jump right into mentorships. This is probably the most intimate and powerful way to personally work with me. We're going to be getting to know each other and going through all of that deep stuff. We're going to create a foundation. We're going to start regulating your nervous system, and we're going to take it step by step so that we're actually going through this trauma healing process in its most effective way. Okay, that's in the second link below. Same second link, you can book a tarot card reading with Alexia if you want to get some insight on what you're currently going through and then what to expect moving into the near future. Definitely consider booking a tarot card reading with Alexia. Second link. Third link is called a LUCIFERS Foundation course. This is a course that I've created with my partner, the Cosmic Observer, and we created it to give you step-by-step instructions on everything it is that you need to know to develop a healthy yet powerful relationship with Lucifer. So that's at the third link. Fourth link is my YouTube memberships. This is where we're all a big family here. So if you want to join into the Universal Mastery Collective and be a part of the family where we're all supporting each other, going through these processes and doing all of this, deep unconscious work on ourselves, I would encourage you to join in. Okay. 4th link. 5th link is also going to be my book recommendations for you. If you're someone that's getting into occultism and you're looking for general education as well as tools that will be able to support you through your entire process of working with the occult, definitely look into that 5th link. All right. With that being said, we're going to wrap it up here. I appreciate all of you very, very, very much. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of the day or nights, wherever you are. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.